Thanks, Buhle. The 10th of December marked the day former President Nelson Mandela signed into law our constitution. On that day, Thabo Mbeki delivered a majestic speech in which he captured the construction of a truly African nation, united in its diversity. Now, 2021 has been a challenging year to our constitutional democracy, from former President Jacob Zuma's refusal to adhere to a constitutional order leading up to the July events and the Phoenix massacre. How far are we in terms of transformation since the signing of the 1996 Constitution? To reflect on this, we're joined by the Publicity Secretary from the National Association of Democratic Lawyers, Adv Lizelle Haskin. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. The timing of reflecting and introspecting on the sort of strides that have been made from the Constitution is a tricky one, because we're looking at a global pandemic, the challenges of being faced with a new variant and also unemployment. The ripple effect has really come down to the people's lives. We're sitting with a book that is deemed the best in the world, yet the relationship between its citizens and the Constitution at the moment is a far cry from the vision of the preamble.
Good morning, Buhle. Thank you very much for having me, our President, Mr.
So, Advocate Haskin, what are your thoughts around the current situation and the impact that the Constitution should have on people's day-to-day lives?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Our President, Mr. Nochezi, sent his greetings this morning. In order to look at the Constitution and the impact it has, it's important to look at what our society was as at 1996 and the progress that we've made since then. If you would allow me, pre-1996, we had a society that was marginalized, exploited, and oppressed. We had also a legacy of racism and inequality. And so when drafting the Constitution and signing it, we had to make an undertaking to eradicate the legacy of our past. So the Constitution, although it's just a legal document, was supposed to facilitate a society through transformation of legal, political, and economic tenets in our society that is also based on democracy, social justice, equality, dignity, and freedom. And in order to understand the changes or the transformative changes that we've had, we've got to also look at the dismantling of the structures of apartheid, as well as the targeting of social structures that cause and reinforce inequality and poverty. We also have to look at the redistribution of social capital and the empowerment of our poor people. And in order to do that, we have, as NADAL, looked at the cases that has gone through the Constitutional Court and the impact, or the profound impact that it has on our law in South Africa, and also the people who obviously, or us as citizens, who've benefited from the Constitution and the rights that is entrenched within the Constitution. And so if I just have a look at the equality kind of cases that have come through our Constitutional Court, there's a few cases that have really had landmark impact on South Africa. The first that we would like to sort of mention is the Home Affairs and Another versus Fourie and Another. That is where lesbian and gay equality laws have been amplified and entrenched, where the courts have found that the failure of the common law and the Marriage Act to provide the means whereby same-sex couples can enjoy the same status. We also have cases like B versus the Magistrate Khayelitsha, where there has been gender equality and the right of African women to inherit under the African customary law of intestate succession. We have political cases like August versus the Electoral Commission, where we have rights of prisoners to vote. And then finally, when you look at the array of socioeconomic rights, we have cases like Grootboom versus the government of RSA, where there is a right to housing. We have cases like Minister of Health versus Treatment Action Campaign, where there's a right to health care and access to HIV treatment. And then finally, we have cases like the occupiers of 51 Olivia Road, Berea Township, where residents or government is not able to evict residents from their homes unless there's been meaningful engagement with them in order to determine possible steps that can be taken to alleviate homelessness. So with that being said, you have to look at, if we look at where we were, the kind of cases that we have today, then you can see that there has been some, or at least has been substantial transformation progress that has been made in South Africa. Not that we are all the way there. There is still a lot that needs to be done. There is still that inequality. There is still that poverty. There is still that dividing lines.
It's interesting you mention inequality, if you'll allow me to interrupt you there, because we heard yesterday former public protector Professor Thulima Donsela speaking about how the inequality in South Africa has essentially mirrored the inequalities of apartheid, really showing that there are still a lot of gaps. Although strides have been made, as you make mention of some of those cases, there is still a lot more work that needs to be done for all sectors of society to essentially benefit from the Constitution and the democracy of South Africa.
I definitely agree with that. We have made significant strides, with the illustration of some of those cases. But more importantly, there is still pockets within society. And even if you look at the Phoenix massacre, that's also a very good example of the dividing lines of the inequalities that we still experience. And that inequalities, and I'm reminded of what John Jeffries, our Deputy Minister, said recently, is that you have poverty still has a black face and privilege still has a white face. And if the haves continue to look like a particular race or class and the have-nots don't, you're going to have those kind of conflicts that come up within the KZN region and the July events. And so more needs to be done. We know that the Constitution is just a document, but it has to be reinforced. And it has to be celebrated, and we have to be reminded as a society of the rights that are entrenched within that. And we've got to, not just as a people, but as a government, we have to look at ways of celebrating the Constitution and reminding ourselves of the rights that are entrenched in there. And also just ensuring that we work together with government and we work as a legal organization. And now we continue to work in enforcing, not enforcing, but at least protecting the human rights that's enshrined in the Constitution and sort of celebrating the supremacy of the Constitution. So I think when we do those, if we're that kind of active citizen, it makes it easier to make further or more progress and in transforming a society through the Constitution.
The attack on the judiciary has been a topic that's really been spoken to numerous times. We, in fact, heard Justice Minister Ronald Lamola also referring to it, saying that perhaps warning against those who attack the judiciary when called to respond to charges of corruption. And I suppose we'll see more and more of this as you and I speak. The SIU has handed over the COVID-19 graft report to President Cyril Ramaphosa when it comes to the abuse of the funds for PPE. What does it all really speak to, or perhaps boil down to, when it comes to understanding the role of the Constitution and also respecting the voice of the judicial system?
I think when you look at the recent case, the constitutional case in terms of the order to compel, it then is a good example of respecting decisions of the court and findings of the court. So it's constitutionally entrenched that when courts or the judiciary make decisions, that citizens are required to obey those decisions, or at least to obey the decisions of the court. The judiciary has played a very active role in protecting the Constitution and the constitutional rights. With regards to the issues of corruption, The law obviously has to run its course. The determinations have to be, all the criminal cases have to be brought before the courts. And I think that we should allow them to make those decisions, and based on, obviously, on the law and the evidence that is presented, that they would then be able to make we trust that they'll be able to make the right decisions. They have most of the time made good decisions, and I'm sure with this one, they'll apply themselves. It's just for us as South Africans to respect the process, or the legal process. Yes, to respect the legal process.
And what role can state institutions play in making good on the promises of the Constitution? Because they too have to play their part and show that there is some level of confidence, at least to the public, when it comes to the overall rule of law.
We're not going to always attain level of confidence amongst all citizens. And so as NADAL, we've always said that you've got to allow and support not just state institutions, but the judiciary and the rule of law. And so if you, not just as NADAL, but if as citizens and the state, we continue to celebrate the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, we continue to support and protect those rights, we would be able to go a long way in both in the decisions that we make and the actions of state. We would be able to then build that confidence that society has. And I think that the Constitution, I mean, when we look at it, although it's just it's just a document, the more you act in line, or the more you promote what is enshrined in the Constitution, the more confidence it would give people, because it really, as you had said in the beginning, it is an amazing document. It's internationally acclaimed. It's been widely celebrated as a document that is not just progressive but transformative. And where we come from as a society and where we are, the objectives of the Constitution is obviously to ensure that there's equality, that there is human dignity, that there's freedom, democracy, etc. So once we as a society and a state just sort of continue to work towards the ideals and the objectives of the Constitution, it by its very nature would allow people to build their confidence in the state and the country, or the society that we stay in.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time and weighing in there on the Constitution marking 25 years. Now, that was Publicity Secretary from the National Association of Democratic Lawyers, Adv Lizelle Haskin, giving us her take there. Up next,